So you're thinking about becoming an ESL teacher, but you're not sure if you should work at a training center or at a traditional school. Well, I've worked at both of them, so let me tell you some of the pros and cons of teaching at a training center versus a traditional school. My name is Megan and I have been teaching ESL in China for the past 10 years. I've worked at training centers, I've worked at traditional schools, I've also had a ton of friends who have worked in training centers and in traditional schools. So let me tell you some of the pros and cons of working in a training center, and hopefully this will help you decide if training centers are a good fit for you. Now, I will be speaking specifically about my experience in China, but a lot of these things I think are duplicated in other countries as well. Before we get into the pros and cons though, what is a training center? A training center is actually a company that teaches English. Usually they will operate in the afternoons and in the evenings, and students of any age, from children to adults, can come to improve their English level after work or after school. Now, is a training center a good fit for you? That's up to you to decide. So let me share some of the pros and cons of working at a training center. I actually think working at a training center is a great choice for a new teacher because most of the time the training center will provide all of the textbooks and will provide lessons for you already. So what you have to do as a new teacher is just open up the lesson plan and go teach the lesson. If you're working at a traditional school, you'll probably be expected to create your own lessons, which is just a lot harder to do if you are new to teaching. Another benefit that we'll get into later is the fact that you really get to improve your teaching skills because you get to teach the same lessons again and again and again. Because you're teaching the same lessons so frequently, it really gives new teachers a chance to hone their skills and figure out what works and what doesn't work for their own teaching style. So if you're new to teaching and a little bit hesitant about it, I think it's much easier to jump into teaching ESL and EFL at a training center compared to teaching at a traditional school. Another pro of teaching ESL or EFL at a training center is that the classes are quite small. Most of the time the classes will be about 10 students. Compare that to a traditional school and it's just going to be much easier to deal with classroom management problems. You're going to be able to spend more time one-on-one with students, and it kind of lowers the pressure a little bit because if a student doesn't understand, it's really easy to pause and discuss with them compared to having a large classroom of 30 or 40 or 50 students. I'm currently teaching at a university and most of my classes have around 40 students in them. That is definitely a bigger challenge compared to dealing with just 10 students. Many times too, training centers will offer one-on-one tutoring, which means that you're just teaching one student at a time, which is even less pressure. A couple of non-teaching pros are that you have so much great time to travel without the crowds. For me right now, I'm teaching at a university, which means during the semester, I'm not free. I can't ask for leave. I can't really travel. If I want to travel, I need to travel during a set holiday or during the summer or winter holiday when everyone else is out of school and traveling with their families as well. If you work at a training center though, it goes all year round, which means you can ask for time off almost any time. That means you can strategically plan your travel to places when there aren't a lot of people. And for a country like China, that is a huge benefit because nobody wants to be traveling with 1.4 billion people. But I've also used that when going to Europe or other places. It's really helpful to travel when everyone else is in work or in school. Another great pro about teaching ESL at a training center is that the schedule is really, really flexible. If I need to ask for a day off at my job at a university, I can't really do that because asking for a day off causes chaos for my entire group of students. But at a training center, the schedules are already more flexible, and asking for one day off is really not a big deal because the students and teachers and classes are rotating each week anyway. So making a change to a schedule is not really a big deal. Another thing I really like about teaching at a training center is that it's really easy to interact with your coworkers. Teaching at a traditional school might also give you a chance to rub shoulders with your coworkers, but it definitely ensures that that will happen at a training center. Right now, I will see coworkers maybe once a semester. It doesn't happen very often at a university, but at a training center, you're walking into the same office every day with the same people. And if you're new to a country, that can be a great way to build relationships and build friendships because your coworkers might end up being some of your closest friends. Let's go back to the teaching part of working at a training center. Another pro is that there is little to no lesson planning that needs to be done. Like I mentioned before, usually the training center will have the courses and the lesson plans all ready for you and ready to go. That means when you walk into the office, you check your schedule, grab your textbooks, grab the lesson plans. It's great for a new teacher, but it's also great for any teacher because that's a lot less extra work. Generally, teachers are not paid for their planning time. So all the hours that I spend planning my lessons are not paid hours. I'm only paid for the hours that I'm teaching. So if you can reduce the amount of lesson planning you're doing, you're actually getting more bang for your buck. Another pro is that there really isn't a strong sense of teaching responsibility in most training centers, at least personally. For me, teaching at a university, I get to see the same students every day or every week throughout the entire semester, and it's my responsibility to help them learn. Of course, I'm not completely responsible for their learning, but it's my job as a teacher to track their progress, to see how they're doing, to adapt lessons as necessary. But at a training center, usually the students will change out and be different every single hour. So you might teach a student on Tuesday and never see them again. Or you might teach a student on Tuesday and not see them for another 2 or 3 months. So there's not really that same pressure or responsibility of this being your individual student that you really are helping progress. And especially for new teachers, that can definitely be a pro because it reduces the amount of pressure. Honestly, teaching at a training center can be pretty easy. Every training center is different, but generally, once you get into the groove, it's quite smooth and it's quite easy to do. Your first month or two might be more difficult because you're getting familiar with the textbooks, you're getting familiar with the schedules and the classes and the courses, and you're getting familiar with your own style of teaching. Once you've got your teaching style and your lesson plans down, you can kind of go on autopilot when it comes to your day in, day out work. So those are some really great pros for a training center if you are considering it. Of course, I also want to share some of the cons because no job is perfect, no company is perfect, but let me share some of the things that you should also consider if you're thinking about teaching ESL at a training center. The first con is for all of those type A achiever people out there like me. If you're teaching at a training center, just be prepared to be a small cog in a big wheel. You really shouldn't view working at a training center as a significant career move. For some people it can be, but for most people it's not. Most of the time, the international teachers are kind of separated from the local teachers. And there are a few reasons for that. Sometimes it's just because of language differences. You know, for me teaching in China, the company was Chinese and a lot of the meetings were done in Chinese. And so that just separated the international teachers from the rest of the company in a way. But there are other reasons as well. A lot of times people will work at a training center for just a few months or just a year and then leave again, and companies are used to that. So they generally just see international teachers as help for their system, but you're probably not going to be taken into the company as a career lifetime job. That can be great because there's less pressure, but if you're really looking for a long-term career, it might not happen at a training center as an international teacher. Just be prepared to go to work, do your job, and go home. Another problem with training centers, and this might be the most significant one, is that there is the possibility for legal troubles. Now, every company is different, so not every company is going to have these problems, but there are a lot of shady people in the world and a lot of shady companies in the world too. So if you're choosing to work at a training center, just make sure that they are doing everything by the book and they're making you a legal teacher at their office. Depending on the country that you're going to be working in, it might require your company to jump through a lot of hoops, do a lot of paperwork in order to get you a work visa, a stay visa, a business visa, whatever it is. So just make sure that they're going to be processing the paperwork correctly. Working at a traditional school does not eliminate this risk either, but it's just a little bit more common in smaller training centers. Another con to training centers is that it can be a little bit difficult to meet friends or maintain friendships when you're working at a training center because of the schedule. Now, you can definitely become good friends with your coworkers and with your students, but because training centers are designed for people to study English after work or after school, most of the work time is in the afternoons, evenings, and weekends. So that means your weekend, your days off, might be on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, rather than on the typical Saturday, Sunday. And I found when I was working at a training center, it was just so much harder to meet friends because all of my friends worked normal 9 to 5, Monday to Friday jobs. And so they wanted to meet on Saturday and Sunday, but that's when I was working. So it was a little bit more difficult for me to maintain friendships outside of the training center circle. I already mentioned that teaching at a training center is probably not a long-term career move. And with that, also just remember that a training center is a business. A training center is not a school for education. So you might find that the leader's mentality is a little bit different from what you expected. You know, at my school, at my university, they're very focused on having high quality education, getting good results for their students, having a good reputation in the education world. But at a training center, it's a business. So the focus of the company might be a little bit different from what you're expecting. I often found a little bit of struggle between my mentality and the company's mentality when I was suggesting something that would maybe help the students improve, but the company was thinking, that will cost too much money in the long run, so we're not going to do that, because the company is focused on business, making money, and maybe you are focused on something different. Another con is that you might actually get a little bit bored with the teaching. Not everyone does. I have a lot of friends who really love working at a training center and just doing the same things and the same lessons because it's easy and because you get to really hone your skills with those lessons. But I found myself getting a little bit bored. After I had taught the lesson a certain number of times, I knew the lesson very well and the lesson was smooth. It always went well, but I felt a little bit bored teaching the same textbooks and the same lessons again and again. Whereas at a university, I will often teach the same lesson again and again throughout the span of 1 week. Then the next week, I will have totally different lessons. So each week I had totally different lessons at a university, but at a training center, you might teach the same lesson multiple times again and again and again and again. Also paired with that, you might find that your skills as a teacher don't advance that much after a certain point, which is why it's such a great choice for a new teacher, because you get to practice those same lessons again and again and really hone your skills. But once you've gotten those lessons down, you're not going to advance that much beyond it. For me, teaching at a university, every semester I get totally different classes, which pushes me and challenges me in new ways to improve my teaching. You might not find that push and that challenge in training center. Now, again, that could be a con, that could be a pro. It's up to you. Training centers can be an excellent place to work, and they could not be the best choice for you. It really depends on your personality. So if you're considering becoming an ESL, EFL teacher at a training center, I would really consider what type of teacher you are. I would also consider what goals you have. If your goal is to learn about ESL and EFL teaching and get some practice in, then a training center could be a great choice. If you want to travel the world, then a training center could be a great choice. If you're considering something totally different, like a long-term career move, then maybe it's not the best choice for you. My advice is to just do your research. Make sure it's a reputable company. Make sure that they're going to do things legally. Go on websites like Glassdoor and hear stories. Make sure they treat people properly. But also know there are plenty of companies out there. So if you find a training center and you don't like it that much, you can always move to a different one. Hopefully this was helpful though. Hopefully this helped you understand the pros and cons of teaching ESL at a training center. If you have any specific questions, you can always leave them in the comments down below. You can also message me on Instagram at Atlas Teaching. Hopefully this will help. I've had a lot of my own experiences. I've also heard a lot of stories from friends and acquaintances. So if you have any specific questions, you can definitely ask. You can check out the website atlasteaching.com for more tips and advice. And you can always check back here for weekly videos. Okay, that's all for today. Good luck on your job search. Good luck on all of your decisions. I will see you next time. Bye.